designation on the CAD system. So if you go in there and take a look, you'll see that. And they hit a appraisal value of about 25% year over year. So pick out a property, if you want to look mine up, 111 West Center Street, and you'll see it actually, I think it's close to 27% increase year over year. The residential property valuations increased between 10 and 20%. So there is a taxation valuation difference. Scott explained that to me, that it's driven by market value. It's not because they're segregating or differentiating, that STRs are selling at a higher price per square foot than residential homes. And I think you all heard that probably from other individuals speaking not too long ago as well. One last thing is, there was an article in the paper today, I forget who the gentleman was, but he indicated there's again 1,000 plus STRs, I forget the number. So I constantly have to kind of repeat. Based on city documentation, Jason gave us, I think it was a March, April timeframe, there's 414 properties. Now within some of those properties, they may be running multiple STRs, so maybe they've got 3 on one property. 414 according to the city. Estimated number of reservation rooms and units combined, 758, and a total of 64% of those are 1 or 2 bedroom units. So I just want to do a level set on what the population is out there. And Jason, welcome your input to correct me if I'm wrong on this.
Generally we don't respond on this portion of our on this portion of the meeting, but I will have some updated numbers at the Monday's meeting. So I can tell you they have increased a little bit, and they are different. So
okay, appreciate it. Our goal is to
will go into great detail on how what the new numbers are. We'll have a breakdown of by zoning districts, units, and then kind of our methodology on how we cleaned up that data from avenues.
Okay, and just one question, then I'll stop here. I assume that because of some of the ordinance activity going on, you've seen probably a large increase of STR permit requests, I would expect, and I'll be quiet.
Not really.
Nope.
We've had a few that have come in that have wanted to kind of lock themselves in, but really the mad rush came in from those that were just having to renew. We were getting 50 at a time from one reservation company because they had let that many lapse, and so that's really been the big rush that we see right now.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Randy. And Belinda McDonald.
Good evening. Belinda McDonald. I'm a resident of Fredericksburg and a member of the Alliance, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I want to address the options that we're presenting that we feel are the fair and equitable solutions to the STR ordinance before us all. I'm sure this body is aware of the layers of complexity presented in that draft. So we're trying to find a way to streamline that, make it easier for you, easier for STR owners and operators, and easier for city staff. In talking with Alliance partners in other cities and regions, we've identified fair and effective measures that work. We believe our community character can be maintained and enhanced through these measures that are found in your handout tonight. These steps include what we call TEC, that is a transparent application process, enforcement in capturing non-permitted STRs and repeat offenders. This would also result in maximizing the revenue by capturing fees and HOP funds that have been lost through noncompliance. We can all agree that improved software is needed and key to this solution. Our current software solution has a reputation throughout the country for leaving STR owners and municipalities in chaos. Let's begin by identifying best-of-class software that can greatly enhance functionality for city staff, reporting for hosts, and provide a 24-hour portal for reporting violations. We've identified 2 software companies that are used throughout the U.S. and are proven to greatly enhance reporting compliance and revenue and preserve the integrity of the communities they serve. We've also provided a comprehensive permit fee structure along with a well-thought-out enforcement fee structure. This fee structure lowers the permit fees for owner-occupied STRs and accessory dwelling units, as those have our fellow neighbors living on site and rarely have an issue. The enforcement fee structure places hurdles and a pathway for removal of STRs that are either non-reporting or repeat offenders. We believe that the solutions provided tonight pardon me, offer a clear path for a positive solution for hosts, neighbors, and our city. And we ask that you support us in our efforts to find a positive solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey Warren? I don't see Jeffrey. Okay. Tammy Smith?
Hi, my name is Tammy Smith. I'm a resident of Gillespie County. I'm also the CFO of Absolute Charm Reservation Service. So I have watched this permit process from the beginning, of course, because we've been in business since 2007. And then I have gone to every community meeting, and heard people's comments. And working with the Alliance, trying to come up with good compromises that help both sides. That I get it that 3-bedroom, 2 baths have noise complaints, we're taking away inventory for families. So what we really are asking is, just like we have, as the permit process has gone along, we started with health and safety. Absolutely, we need permits to make sure our guests and our community is safe. And then we needed a permit because some people weren't paying taxes. Absolutely been paying taxes since 2007. We need to catch those that aren't. And then we went to noise. We need permit, we need to monitor noise. Absolutely. We need noise monitoring systems. We need people on call. We need all of those things. So again, we're compromising with noise trying to come up with less occupancy in rooms. Again, trying to come up with compromises. Parking, trying to come up with compromises on, okay, where can we put extra guest cars, and what can we do to let the guests know ahead of time, you only have a certain amount of parking spaces, can't bring more than those cars. Compromising to try to get the problems that the city is saying that are needed. Trash, again, compromises. The last thing that has been has addressed has been affordable housing. And the thoughts on this, and I talked to the mayor about this as well already, is 1 and 2 bedroom homes being by right, changing it. And so that way it'll allow for 3-bedroom homes to be, to free up inventory for families to purchase. And there's really 2 reasons for this, is because common sense tells us that a 1 and 2 bedroom home, and we have plenty of them, 80% of my inventory out of 176 rooms is 1 and 2 bedrooms. 75% of Guest House Schmitz is 1 and 2 bedroom homes. I have had 3 noise complaints since 2007, and I believe that is because I have smaller rooms. I can't accommodate 20 people. So 2 reasons to have this by right is to preserve our heritage and our Sunday houses, preserve those 1 and 2 bedroom homes that common sense will tell us that a family of 4 is not going to purchase. So if we limit B&Bs and limit 1 and 2 bedrooms, they're going to deteriorate because no one's going to buy them, because you can't get an STR permit, and they're not going to be bought by a family of 4. So we're just trying to come up with some compromises with the city. We understand that there are issues, and we're trying to address those issues and come up with compromises. So thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Ed Kauser?
I'm going to save my comments for item, I think it's 5.
You want to wait until it's on the agenda? Okay.
I do have a handout. That wasn't distributed hard copy, simply the info I emailed over to you today. If y'all didn't see that, so I'll
Oh, for later. All right. Thank you. Thank you all for your comments. Is there anyone else, Shelby, that we missed, or anyone are we online? Did anyone miss? Okay. Thank you all. All right, then we'll start with the public hearings. The first item is public hearing 5A. Request Z2116 by Stuart Barron, owner, to consider a request zoning change for C1 neighborhood commercial to C1.5 medium commercial for approximately .647 acres of land located on the north side of Friendship Lane, approximately 700 feet west of the intersection of Friendship Lane and South Washington Street. I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll make a motion, we go into public hearing.
A motion by Jim, a second by Tim. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, Mr. Barron, are you going to make your presentation? All right. That's right. And Jeff Lawrence will be stepping down for this one. Want to put that in the minutes?
Good evening, board members, and first of all, thank you for your service. The good news is this won't be a short-term rental property that we're talking about today, so hopefully we can enjoy that a little bit. What I am here today to ask for is that we change our zoning there at this piece of property. I believe it's on the, they have the map there in front of you. It currently is commercial 1, and we'd like to move to commercial 1.5. I assume y'all are going to take these in order. I can do the whole presentation now, and then y'all can ask questions about any piece of it, if it's a zoning piece or the site plan or the conditional use permit, or do you want to take them individually?
I would say at this point, we can take them individually because they are set up where obviously the zoning changes first. That could get approved, CUP is second. They're not mutually exclusive. They are together, but they could be separate. So
Okay.
we'll just do them separately if that's okay.
Okay.
So I'm here, I can answer questions about the zoning change of yours. That is our request to move from commercial 1 to commercial 1.5. You'll see on the map that there is some commercial 1 across this, or commercial 1.5 across the street from us. There's also commercial 2. There's also commercial 1. So it's not, I wouldn't consider it spot zoning. There's those zones that exist all the way around us. So with that, I'll answer any questions y'all might have.
All right. Thank you.
Or you should have some comments that Shelby had passed out regarding those requests.
Correct. We have 2 that approved that. Yes. 2 landowners, those 2 within the 200 feet. Okay. Is there anyone here who would like to make any comments on this request? All right, then I would entertain a
Move
motion
to
to
go
go
to
on.
public hearing back into regular session.
I have a motion by Tim, a second by Jim. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, then we'll take up action item number 6A, discuss consideration and recommendation regarding request Z2116A. Jason, you have any comments?
Will you pull up that map there? Okay. Thank you. So yes, the request on this is for commercial C1.5. The current zoning on the property C1 is more of a neighborhood commercial zoning district that goes through, generally it's mostly office complexes. There's no real retail that's allowed. There's no restaurants. It is attorney's office, doctor's office, things of that nature. So kind of given the general change in the area and what is happening, we're seeing a lot of new residential developments in that area. Across the street, we have the Oaks, Friendship Oaks subdivision, R1A, a couple hundred homes going in. So we see a large population increase in this area. Obviously, those individuals will need services that they can access without having to drive across town for those other services. So looking at the C1.5, it allows some small scale retail, does allow restaurant limited. And so the definition or description of those are kind of mom and pop coffee shops. So something like Clear River Ice Cream or Java Ranch. Staff would say, okay, yes, if they came in and wanted to go in there, we'd say, yes, that would be an approved use. If it was Starbucks, we would say, no, that's not really a mom and pop shop. Obviously traffic is a concern. So that's something we're looking at. But given the location, obviously we'd like to see more of the property, come in. This is just one singular tract, but it's very common to see that C1.5, up on the highway, and then maybe C1 as it goes further back. So looking at the requested zoning change, given the different dynamics in the area, it is still in line with the future land use plan. That area is called out commercial. Most of that property is in that commercial center. So that's why staff is recommending approval of the requested zoning change.
Which is the subject property, the pink one? Or
Yeah.
that one?
Little bitty square.
Well, that little square.
Yes.
So we're not proposing the whole tract go to C1.
And
No, and there's actually 4 tracks in that area, ownership tracks. So there's the remainder of the track that this lot is on, and then there's another ownership to the top. Obviously, if this was all requested C1.5, staff would have a different recommendation because it does butt up against some other existing homes up in that area, and access is not the best. And I mean, there's an unimproved portion of Sunset there, but given the location here, they would be accessing through a mutual access easement. So it'd be one entrance serving multiple properties. You know, we feel comfortable with the requested zoning change.
So one of the comments was from Barbara Hunter, and she said that I agree with all of it, but it should all be the same. So is she part of that purple track? Is that some relative or something
Yes, sir, she's marked up. She owns the track
behind you?
I can point to it, I got through there.
so my question, Jason, is why not do both tracks side by side that are fronting on Friendship? So you're going C2 to C1 to C1.5 right alongside on Friendship Lane. How do we resolve that?
Well, I think that'll be up to the landowners to come in. Stuart he doesn't have any control over that. It's not a city-initiated rezoning. Generally, the city doesn't do that unless we're looking at some kind of big comprehensive plan update, and then there's some things that need to change there. So it is, a piecemeal project, but ultimately it's up to the landowners to determine or request their uses at this point.
So that's not spot zoning then, is it?
I would have to lean to Daniel on that, but my recommendation is that it's not. I mean, spot
it's a
spot
duck-
zoning has.
If it's a duck, it's a duck.
I hear you, sir.
Okay.
However, because that general area allows commercial use. This is not surrounded by R1 and we're pulling one lot out to change that commercial. It is all commercial use currently. That's my feeling on it, but I'm not an attorney, so I'm going to put Daniel on the hot seat for a second.
So there's several factors that are looked at in determining spot zoning, and I can't give you, it's not a bright line test. I can't say yes it is or no it isn't. So some of the factors there's some of the factors that seem to be favorable for this, and there's some that aren't as favorable. So you want to look at whether the change is consistent with the comprehensive plan or the land use plan. I think that's the case here. You need to look at if it's going to cause substantial detriment to the adjoining properties. You want to look at the nature of the impact on neighboring properties and how much the level of disparity between maybe what you're zoning to and the adjacent property. So like if you had residential and industrial or something, you've got a huge disparity. Here, that disparity seems to be much smaller. It's almost like a step up. Another factor you would look at is whether the property is suitable for use as presently zoned. I think there's probably I think that factor probably isn't really resolving in favor of the landowner because there's probably you can probably use the property as zoned. Maybe not exactly what he wants to use it for, but it's not like it's unusable in its current zoning. And then your final factor is going to be relationship to the public health. I mean, is this in the public interest to make the zoning change or not? So those are all kind of factors, and the more of those that are positive for the zoning change support the change, and it's not spot zoning. If you couldn't answer yes to any of those questions and it looked like like there's a huge disparity between the zoning, didn't really serve any public interest, you were basically giving one person a benefit and causing a detriment on all the surrounding properties.
We don't know that at this point, do we? On this particular piece with the adjoining property owners?
Right, well, I mean,
Because they're not part of the process, is that correct? They haven't been asked and they have not come forward with any request of their own?
They have not come forward with any requests of their own, but they have been notified as part of this process. So they could have sent in a response and said, no, we object. This will be detrimental to our proposed use at this time. I think one of the biggest concerns was the adjacent property. If you go back to the next map, that's a future land use map there. So the R1 that you see next door to the right or east, that is city-owned property. That is not going to be at this time any housing or single-family residential. The city was given that as to add to their existing the blue parcel we own. That's a detention area, and so the thought process long-term is a city public park in this area. So I think that was some of the concerns, people had about, well, does commercial next to a park, is that detrimental? Does that hurt the park? From a planning perspective, some of the most famous parks in the world are surrounded by commercial park users. If you're there all day, if there was an ice cream shop or a donut shop, it's an opportunity to go and get there. So again, the uses in the C 1.5, staff didn't have a lot of concerns about the zoning change and how it might affect the park. So again.
What about access to the back part of the property?
So currently there is an existing access easement. And let's see, I don't know if we have it's probably the next.
What kind of easement is that, Jason?
It's a mutual access easement. It's, I believe, 40 feet wide. You can kind of see it on the left-hand side there. It's going to go between the proposed structure, and then it goes all the way up, and it's going to serve all property owners at this time. So obviously that will need to be improved, but that would be a private access drive. So very similar what you see in more urban settings when you get as far as on TxDOT roadways. They don't want a curb cut every 5 minutes. They prefer to have one access easement where multiple businesses utilize that, and then that way you can travel between business versus having to come out and go back in.
Yeah.
30 feet, sorry, that's the access easement.
And to the north of those 4 parcels, is that where the potential sunrise
Yes,
cut
ma'am,
through
if you
will
go back
eventually
to that.
go? I
You'll see it
remember
on,
from the street plan that.
yeah, you'll see it on the map. So those back parcels will have secondary access if and when they choose to develop. You'll see it, it's the area that doesn't have any coloring in there. That's public right of way at this point. So say that top northeast corner wanted to develop under C1, they could put an apartment complex there, 3 stories, 38 feet. So in that instance, at that point, they would need secondary access because of the number of units. They would be required to improve that area for fire and EMS access, as well as just a secondary means of egress on the property.
And currently, as I recall, when we did see 1.5, we have some additional screening and setback restrictions when it's abutted up against R1, am I correct?
We do, but it's not really additional. We have those regardless of that.
Any
So-
commercial abutting or R1 gets
Yes, ma'am.
some extra treatment on that side?
Yep, so the only issue with this one you'll notice is there's actually, if you can zoom in a little bit more, this parcel is actually a U shape. They don't abut the R1 directly. There's, I believe, 30 feet between the R1 zone and this property. So for whatever reason, this property was platted as kind of a music note and comes down and it has 2 accesses versus 170-foot of frontage. So the staff's not real fond of that layout, but that was approved and that's an existing plat. So we're kind of working with the hand that we were dealt on that. So if he builds, he would not have any additional setbacks because he's not abutting.
He's 30 feet away.
Yep.
How many feet is that on that eastern side?
30 feet from the R1 to
R1?
his property.
Okay.
And then he has an additional building setback. You'll see on the site plan on the next
Right.
case, there's
I saw
parking
that.
and driveway.
So that's that plus 30 feet
Yep.
to the actual R1. Because I'm considering that the city may change its mind on what they want to do with that piece of property, and it may actually be R1 at some point rather than a park. So I don't want to assume it's going to be a park. I want to assume it's going to be what it's currently shown as.
I agree that maybe in the future, it's a little difficult to transition it out of a park. That, because of state law, they would have to go into a vote to the voters and all of that. Because it's parkland, we can't just.
Yeah, but I don't want to, it's listed as R1, so I want to assume that it's, right now it's R1, that's what we're dealing with.
Anybody else have questions, comments, or a motion?
Oh, I forgot the item number, but I'll make that motion. Is it Z 2116?
A? Yes, 6A.
All right, I'd like to make a motion. We approve Z 2116.
A.
A.
Oh, it says A on, yes. A. All right. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Second by Jill. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, that motion carries. So we will move on to public hearing 5B, request Z2116 by Stuart Barron, owner, to consider a conditional use permit per section 3.205 to allow a drive-through or drive-in facilities for approximately 0.647 acres of land located on the north side of Friendship Lane, approximately 700 feet west of the intersection of Friendship Lane and South Washington Street. I'll entertain a motion to open a public hearing.
So moved.
Motion
Second.
by Tim, second by Jim. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, you have the floor again.
Okay, so we've gone ahead and moved forward with our process and tried to, hoping that y'all would agree to the 1.5, and thank you very much for doing that. When we started this process, we decided, talking amongst ourselves, with my mother and Judy Vordenbaum and my wife Dawn Barron, we're all locals, and we wanted to build something for the locals that they could use. Now, there's a lot of tourist things that happen in town, and we decided we want to do something that the local people can probably, what they can get behind, what they can really use in their day-to-day life. So we've come up with this kind of a shopping center that you see laid out there on the screen. When we came up with that design, actually a local architect we used to do design work, Barry, he's also in the audience, so we're hoping to use a local builder. So it's kind of all local people, local businesses, and local use. I went to a few different local businesses in town and asked them if they were going to expand their businesses, what would they be looking for, and where would they want to go, and how would that be of interest to them. I did bring up Friendship Lane because that was a piece of property that we're building on. So I talked to a coffee shop, a pharmacy, and also a dry cleaning store. And the thing that they said that they would use the most is a drive-through window. It benefits people. There's a lot of people. My mother's liquor store uses a drive-through window. That seems to be the thing that a lot of people are using. I mean, you've seen it at Whataburger. You might have seen them out on the street trying to get to their drive-through window. So it's trying to devise something that we can use and that the local tenants would use, the local businesses would use, and also the local people would use. We came up with this floor plan which allowed 2 drive-through windows on either side. And one on each side. If you break that into three, this space would be into 3 different spaces. There would be one on the left, which would be the potential coffee shop, about 1,800 square feet, and then there'd be a location in the middle. I'm thinking it's probably like something similar to a barber shop or something like that. And then on the right-hand side, maybe the pharmacy or a dry cleaning store, something for all those people to use in the area. And we broke that up into the amount of use that they were going to use. If you go through a drive-through typically at a dry cleaning store, there's not usually a lot of stacking. You may be there 2 or 3 cars, and you drive up to the window to get your clothes and you move on. You're not placing an order and waiting for it to get made. So we put that on the right-hand side of the building and gave about 2 or 3 places for people to stack out there as they're getting their dry cleaning. And then as you go across the back side of the building, you come all the way around the back, that would be kind of the coffee shop area. The stacking would be along the back side of the building. And then they would come up through a drive-through window on the left-hand side there where it says restaurant limited, kind of closer to the front of the building to give as much stacking as possible and get out of everybody's way as much as possible. So that was kind of the layout that we came up with the building. We are using substantially less square footage than we are allowed per zoning. And we gave more parking spaces than we were allowed per zoning. So we want this to be convenient and easy for everybody, and easy to use, and just be an amenity to the Friendship Lane area over there. So that's where we're at so far. So if I have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
How many drive-through windows? Just 2?
2 of them, yes, sir.
One for the dry cleaner and one for the restaurant.
Yes, sir.
Is there anyone here that wants to make any comments on this request?
I'll make a motion, we move out of public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion by Jim, a second by Tim. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. You have any comments?
Yes, just real quick, The little bit of the staff thinking on the conditional use permit request is matches up with the C 1.5 request. We're looking at a kind of change in demographics and shift in use out in that area, expecting a increase in population. So a shopping center like this would be utilized by that portion of the community. There's not much out in that area as far as quick kind of pull-in shops like that, and so we can support the CUP. Now, as part of this process, CUPs have to approve site plans. Normally, you see those kind of separate in the process, but we can do that together here. So going through this, staff does recommend approval of the CUP, but we have some conditions that we want to place on those. I think the first and the biggest one, I've talked to Stuart about this, is at this point, given the layout of the property, we would only support one drive-through on this facility. As you can see, if you're pulling around and you're in line at the east side of the building where the proposed laundromat would go, or laundry service, and you're pulling out, but you're stacked up to get to the menu board behind the building for the coffee shop, there's some conflict movements there. And then additionally, one of our comments was, this was originally in the back of the building, there was a loading area that's required by code. So they removed the loading area to kind of get out of the conflict, but that's a requirement, so it has to be there. So that was one of the concerns we had. We just felt the site is, with two drive-throughs, we just don't think that'll function very well. Again, one of them, yes, we can support the use of one. A couple other issues that we had were with regards to the cross-hatched areas that you see to the north and to the east. Those are parking areas. The applicant is proposing pervious concrete in that area to get under the impervious cover caps. Staff's concern with that was we asked for some type of additional detail, because pervious concrete, it sounds great. When you watch videos of it, it's pretty amazing stuff. But from a real world, everyday use, some of those require special back trucks that actually go through there and suck up all the silt that gets deposited in there. And some of them have to be done weekly, some of them are monthly, and they're quite expensive. So what I've seen in my experience with it is that maintenance goes away, and then it becomes just standard concrete, and then we have issues. So I think that's an issue staff would look at. Now, again, city engineer can make that determination if he gets the detail and the specs and he feels comfortable with that. That would be something he could do. But right now, we can't support the pervious concrete in there. So there was a couple other minor tweaks on the site plan that it still needs to go through some revisions, but obviously we have to act on the CUP request first. So staff's recommendation is that the CUP be approved, but that only for one drive-through, that's what staff will support, and that the condition that the applicant come back to a P&Z at a later date with the site plan that will meet city regs and be approved at that point. So those are the only two conditions staff has.
All right, thank you. So we're on action item number 6B, discuss consideration and recommendation regarding request Z2116B. Does anyone have any questions of Jason?
I do.
I don't.
Go ahead, Jim. I can't recall us ever approving a CUP/drive-through that we did not know the specific tenant. Does anybody remember that? And I've been on it a long time. I think the first one I would approve was McDonald's 20 years ago, so. I can't think of any. And I don't even know the reason why, but I just don't know we've ever done it this way. So, give us some help here, Jason.
Oh, I'll try my best. From my perspective, I can put myself in Stuart's position. Is it's kind of hard to get a tenant if you don't know that you have approval for the building. That's probably one issue. I guess you could make it conditioned on.
Because the reason I'm going here with a blanket approval for the drive-through, I know he said he wants to put a local person in there, and that all sounds good and dandy, but what if we end up with another Starbucks that's gonna have 200 cars every hour coming through it?
Well,
And that's why we've always approved CUP drive-ups when we knew the tenant was, and they gave us the numbers. So this time, we're not knowing the numbers because it's an unknown.
Right, so that's where you'd have to have a little faith in my department. So when that person comes in for their C of O and they come through our development review process, That's gonna be our question is who's going in, what's your tenant, what's your traffic flow? And again, if Stuart says it's a Starbucks, I'm gonna make the determination that doesn't meet the definition of retail limited. You
You
know,
still have that?
I still have that authority.
I didn't know that.
And so at that point, Stuart could say, hey, I don't agree with you. I'm gonna dispute your recommendation. They go to ZBA and they can kind of hash out whether my determination was correct or incorrect. So there are some avenues there. But ultimately, you know, from a staff perspective, again, we kind of look at the building and the use. A tenant, again, Tops Donuts or something like that, that's small scale, you know, we would support that, but Starbucks, definitely not. I mean, we understand the volumes of those types of facilities and what they
I mean, you could put a Clear River in there, we could back that drive up all the way to Comfort. So,
Oh, now you're bragging.
do. You're not wrong. You're not wrong, so.
so I just remember that was kind of our theory all along, was that we just didn't approve the CP drive-through until we knew. But now that you're clarifying that you have that ultimate say-so on that volume, because it's a volume traffic issue, nothing else.
Yes, so that's what we do is we look at kind of traffic generated and traffic counts and make sure, hey, what's going on? Because obviously, we still don't know what's going to develop on the rest of the property. It could be all doctor's offices, it could be all real estate offices, it could be all apartments. At that point, you know, those accumulative uses and trips generated may trigger widening of that easement, left turn, right in, right out only. I mean, there's all kinds of traffic controls that we look at once those uses start popping out.
Jason, I don't know whether I know you well enough for this.
Well, you know, like I said, you take a leap of faith on this one.
Are you asking me to vote on that?
I am, yes, I am.
Anyone else have questions, comments? Oh, we're out of the public area, but go ahead. I'll let you. Go ahead. Everybody else.
I just wanted to say something on pervious concrete. I have property that is catty corner to Nimitz Museum. We call it Tidal Corner. And we wanted to save the trees, and so we put that pervious concrete down there. And I'm gonna say that we did it 20 years ago. I'd have to look up exactly. To save the trees, and this is, you'll see a lot of trees. That piece of property is full of trees. We went to the city council to make it be part of the park, but they turned us down. So then we said, okay, we have to develop it, but we want to still keep the trees and we want to keep them watered. And that's why we have that type of concrete, and we've never had any problem with it. So we'll do what we need to, but our whole thing is we want to keep water on those trees and not have concrete all over the place so they don't get water. So just a little something on that for y'all. Any questions?
Thanks, Judy.
All right, anybody else?
Just to clarify, so we're approving, if we approve this cup, it's kind of in concept, and then they're gonna have to come back with the specifications. right,
Not to us.
Not to us.
Well, depends on how your motion is. If you choose to approve the cup with the site plan as presented, then that's your motion. If you choose to approve the cup with the condition that they come back to P and Z through the normal site plan process to fine tune all of the issues. I mean, there were several comments that we still have to address through this. You could do that as well. Or you could recommend denial. I mean, those are kind of y'all's options.
So we can approve with the conditions that you've provided us here in your recommendation.
Yes.
And add,
And,
that it comes back.
And add.
and you could also, if you have concerns, this is a conditional use permit process. So if you had other concerns on, you know, hours of operation, lighting, I mean, they have to meet the city's code regarding lighting, but.
Could we require the tenant to know who the tenant is?
As part of maybe the approval of the site plan, maybe?
I'm asking you, or Daniel.
It sounds like we're looking at build it and they will come on this one. And that whatever they build is going to create the restriction on what kind of tenant they're going to attract.
Yeah, it's hard to focus on a specific.
Am I right, Baron?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. So if you like, I can
Stuart,
answer
sorry.
a few of those questions.
Yeah.
But yes, we don't have any signed contracts. We have talked to some local people. I can share, I'll share them individually if you like. I don't know if you want their name. Because, we're a long ways away from striking a deal with them, to be honest with you. We got to build a building, they got to look at it, make sure it works with their needs. But that is the desire. What we presented here tonight is where we are today. We're going to work with Jason. I think we demonstrated that we're willing to. We got our comments back last Friday, and we had to get them into them by Wednesday. And so we weren't able to address all those. I thought we had them addressed, but it sounds like we missed a few. As Mom stated, we do have the pervious in other areas. That loading area behind there, still going to be a loading area. It's just going to have a fence in it so he can get the parking on the other side. We got to work through those details, but we're willing to work with them. We just want a path forward, and so we can keep making progress.
That sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah,
As long as they have to come back.
I'm kind of like concerned about having the 2 drive-through windows because of the load on on the acreage and on that location. So I wouldn't be in favor of 2 drive-through windows. I'd be fine with 1. And I think gotta come back and fine tune the site plan and then bring it back is where I'd fall out. Because once y'all get those things ironed out and you can bring a clean site plan that we can approve, but I think we can approve the CUP tonight.
I think you're right.
Just say, bring the site plan back after you've tweaked it for approval again. Does that sound?
I may not have the tenants done. I mean, if I have a site, I don't have a building yet, and so I may, the next time I come back, if it's just approval for the site plan, it's gonna be very similar to what you're seeing here tonight. And I still won't know the tenants because they need to know when it's,
And
when is it
honestly,
gonna be up.
I'm actually less concerned about the tenants because you're not gonna attract a big corporate tenant because they want you to build it to their
Exactly.
spec. And
Well-
you're gonna build it and then you're gonna attract a tenant. So you're gonna attract a smaller local tenant. You're not gonna attract a Starbucks because they have their own spec and they won't do it.
And that's what we're going for, and that's why we're here tonight. Just if y'all can give us
So
the
that's why the
approval to go
tenancy
forward,
doesn't bother me as
we'll
much.
build it to what the city tells us to do. I just can't, I won't get tenants. I've tried and I've tried and I've tried. I can't get anybody to sign up without a building.
So should I make a motion?
Yes, please.
Certainly.
Okay, I move that we approve Z2116B. We approve the CUP. The conditions are, it's good for only 1 drive-through facility on the property, and that the applicant works with city to redo the site plan, bring us back the corrected site plan for approval at another
Back to
meeting.
P and Z.
Back to P and Z at another meeting.
Can I throw a question in?
Sure.
Is there any way do you see that they could remedy that 1 versus 2 drive-throughs? Physically, I mean?
Not without drastically altering the site plan. I mean, the building layout. Looking at that, if you look at it, just, if you come around and that is a mom and pop coffee shop, if you look at where the menu board is, I mean, if you have 3 or 4 cars stacked up, that's gonna get you to the end of that building. And then your other drive-throughs coming back through, we see a lot of possibility for conflict and issues at that one. And so that's why we can't support the.
So Barry, Stuart, any way to fix that?
So if I can, I don't have the cursor. I'll have to point to the board.
The reason I'm asking that question is that as a business owner, we almost failed during COVID because we did not have a drive-through.
No, I
And a
agree.
lot of businesses in town did not have drive-throughs, did fail. So I want to make
Right.
sure that if that's something that could make a business or his business work, that we, without eliminating, that we pursue every option to get that second drive-through. That's part of his business plan. But if it's not physically possible, then we move on.
Thank you for that consideration. What we're proposing initially was that we could come in down here, and that's why we did the angle parking all the way around, because we really anticipate this to be way out. And so it's not dual traffic. It's wide enough to be, and it is a fire lane. It's wide open fire lane, and it's wide enough for dual traffic. And it's actually wide enough for heading parking. But these cars will come in, if you can see a parking space is about this wide, so if somebody's at a window, you have 1, 2, 3, almost 4 parking here at the as a drive-through location for the laundromat, which we thought was pretty adequate for that, or maybe even a pharmacy. I mean, if they come in and they thought that doesn't work for them, and then somebody that has more than them can't do it. It just won't work because the layout of the building. We don't want that problem either. We have to be able to send it. And so as they come around, and so if this one was potentially leased out first, we have somebody very interested in that spot. And if they come in and say, hey, you know, they're all leased out, and it turns out that there's going to be more stacking, and we don't lease this as a drive-through location. We just incorporate all that into one drive-through. But right now, we don't have those tenants. We don't know who it is. We're looking at all the options, trying to build something that's the biggest benefit for everyone.
My concern on that east side where your retail drive-through is, you've got parking, people trying to go in and out, back out, even though it's slant, they're trying to go in and out. Plus you have the restaurant patrons trying to go around the retail drive-through to get to the restaurant retail drive-through. That's a lot of congestion in a very small space.
But we intend everybody to come in at this location.
I agree.
If you need to do some traffic marking to.
Yeah, but I'm looking at that lower corner right there. So now you're gonna have restaurant drive-through patrons coming through, plus retail drive-through patrons right in that same spot. Your retail side starts stacking up. Your restaurant people are trying to get around the retail drive-through to get to the restaurant drive-through. And you've got parked people trying to back in and back out of those slanted spaces. That's a very congested spot. I understand, but I understand, but I'm thinking about the kinds of people that park and drive and what they're gonna do in there.
And the benefit too is that it is a retail restaurant limited. They won't let us do a big restaurant. It's
Right.
very specific. They close at, I think, 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
something like
I
that.
understand,
And
but
so
during
they're-
COVID, I went through the drive-through over at Campo Azul, and you wouldn't believe the crazy things people did trying to get in and out of that
It's a
drive-through.
prime example of why we're trying to do something for the locals that do drive-throughs, because people like it. And so we're trying to make it work. If it doesn't work for us, then we stop it on our end before it gets any further.
I just think it's creating too much
That's
congestion on the
That is
property.
the exact setup as the new Starbucks in the, not the craft, whatever the craft store is in Kerrville on, I mean, it's the exact setup.
And it's a horrible setup.
But they don't have the width. So once you're in the Starbucks drive-through, you can't get out.
That setup that they have there is horrible.
And that's a restaurant coming in that far. This one there is also.
And let me
And I think just to clarify staff's concern is really the stacking on where the menu board on that other retail restaurant, that's gonna be what causes the issue. Cause I think, you know, even if we're talking a small coffee or donut shop, you can go through the donut shop next to McDonald's every morning and there are 5 or 6 cars and that's not typical. I mean, that's gonna be a daily thing. So that's gonna push you back to that corner there.
So one question for you, if we approve, not approving the second drive-through, does he have the ability at a later date when he has a identified tenant to come back and ask for a modification of that?
Always.
I'm good.
Wait, how many-
We have a motion on the floor.
What we
have
have
a question first. How much parking is required and how much do you have? Because I agree with Polly with as far as the congestion, but is there some way to alter the layout of the parking to where you get fewer spaces and you open that up? I'm not the architect, so I can't tell, you know, whether it's 15 feet or 45 feet
On
that
the
they
next
have.
sheet, you scroll forward,
Well,
it'll show you.
Yeah, the data is on this particular page with the parking is calculated. And of course, we're making some assumptions for the restaurant since the restaurant limited because we don't have it truly identified at this point. But under the city ordinances, the restaurant limited, if it were the 1,800 square feet, would likely need 17 spaces. That'll be defined when the tenant is defined. And the retail personal services section of that building is required to have 10 spaces. So 27 is what's required by ordinance. We have 32. The reason we chose to use the 45-degree angle parking is because it does create a traffic flow around the building where people aren't trying to back up and come back through the front. But we had purposely oversized those driveways. If you look at the ordinances and the minimums that could be used, we could have made a bigger building, but we didn't. We kept the building smaller so we have more room for vehicles to move without obstructing one another. There's no way if somebody's in the drive-through on the right, that a person parked on the right parking will not be able to easily back out and leave.
And,
They're
and
not
I'm
gonna
not,
conflict
and I'm
with
not as concerned about, if that single drive-through was the only thing interfering with that parking at any one point in time, I wouldn't be as worried about it. But because you've got that other drive-through that could stack back and wrap back around the building and parallel up next to that retail drive-through. If you get too many cars lined up at that menu board at that restaurant,
But even the back
they're
parking
gonna
is
come all the
oversized
way
as
back
well.
around, and you're gonna have not one line of cars, but two line of cars next to each other, and now the parking becomes a problem.
There's enough room at the back for these cars to back out, even if this were closed off.
No, I'm talking about
Just talking
the east
about
side.
stacking all the way around. So-
Right.
Yeah,
If
and
that
so we-
restaurant, if that restaurant drive-through starts stacking around at the east side of the building on the outside of the retail drive-through, now you have two lines of cars stacked side by side. I don't think that's very safe.
So the thing that I'll say is that being a landlord, the owner, we don't want that either. We
Right.
want it to be functional. And so if we need to move the menu board further this direction to get more stacking up there, we can.
Yeah.
If we don't have a tenant here to use that drive-through, we can. This just gives us those options and to do that in the future.
Okay,
Without-
well,
without y'all's approval here.
I'm assuming you guys are gonna work all these details out with staff before you bring this back. So my motion on the floor is that you'll bring it back.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you.
All right, we have a
Call for the
motion.
question.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Does everybody understand what the motion is? Do we need Polly to restate it?
No, we are approving the CUP with the two conditions that we required, is that they're being approved for one drive-through and that they will bring the site plan back after it's been modified for approval by PNC.
I thought you were saying the whole thing.
No, no,
Okay,
no, no.
gotcha.
All right, everybody understand that? Any other questions or discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, great. This goes
Go
to
build it.
city council. Yeah, okay. All right, thank y'all. I'm gonna go to public hearing 5C, request Z2117 by John Needham of Seco Enterprises LLC to consider an amendment to the planned unit development zoning to allow building heights to exceed the maximum height of 38 feet for approximately 32.53 acres of land located at the southwest intersection of Friendship Lane and South Eagle Street. I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Tim, a second by Jim. Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, who's going to be making the presentation? You will? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm John Needham. Appreciate your time this evening. As noted in your packet, I'm here today regarding a request for a variance to, frankly, what appears to be a conflict regarding height, how the height is measured relative to the project we brought to you several months ago on Friendship and South Eagle. If you'll recall, at that time, we proposed a multifamily and single-family for rent project that would include both some two-story product on Friendship Lane, which we were requested to go from three-story to two-story, which we did. The back buildings were intended to be three-story, and as we got further into it, we discovered that there is one provision of your code that would measure to the peak of our roof, and we would then actually exceed the 38-foot height limit. We assumed that it would be measured by the IBC, International Building Code, which actually measures to the average. We since found out, I guess this week, that there's a separate provision in your code that does measure that way. So there's apparently some conflict there. But in any event, our goal, as we outlined for you guys when we first came to you, is to create a residential community. All of our single-family for rent probably be two-story with gables. And as you'll see from this elevation graphic that we provided to you, we would meet the IBC with the pitched roofs. If we're not able to do that, we would have to go to a flat roof. And quite frankly, our view is that creates a much less aesthetically pleasing, much less residential feel. More importantly for us, again, I think we've outlined for you that our goal here is to provide some attainable housing for the workforce. And to go to a flat roof would cost us about $1.5 million of additional construction costs. So our view is that it's, number one, aesthetically more pleasing, number two, more affordable for our construction costs. And then thirdly, there appears to be a number of precedents for this measurement. First of all, there was a case, a PUD very similar to ours for three-story that occurred about a month before ours did. The Carr family has another multifamily project proposed on, I'm not sure if I'll pronounce it right, Ufer Street, that in their proposal outlined the IBC definition, and it was approved with that provision in place. And then I think in staff's report that was provided to you, it appears that they have historically utilized the definition within your ordinance that would allow a measurement based on the average. So we would respectfully request a variance be granted if necessary for us to build with gable roofs.
All right, thank you very much. Is there anyone here that wants to make any comments on this? Yeah, we have some.
I move we go out of public hearing back to the regular session.
Second.
We have a motion by Tim, a second by Jim. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, let's go to action item number 6C. Discussion, consideration, and recommendation regarding request Z2117. Jason?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, board members. So looking at this, the applicant is correct. This is UD. There are a couple discrepancies in our code that speak to height differently. And he is correct in his assertion on how we have historically done this. So the way this all came about was when we got the request, going through the code, I looked and I saw the definition, and the definition says you measure to the highest point. However, later in the section of the code, there is a section on how you come to your measurements, and it says to the midpoint of the roof. I verified this with staff. What has been our historically, what have we done? It has been to the midpoint of the roof, not to the highest point. So from my perspective, again, I said this before, I'm new here, but I don't always interpret things the way Brian did. So I would not have looked at the definition. I would have gone with the measurement and said, okay, this is how you do it, because one's a definition and one is an actual subject of measurement. If I had kind of came in and said, or if Brian was in the seat and I said, yeah, I'm going to follow his interpretation, we probably wouldn't even be here, because I would have approved these building plans because the midpoint is under the 38 feet. But because there is this discrepancy, that I am new, and this is a PUD, we wanted to paper that so that everybody was clear on what this actual height was. So if you were to approve this amendment tonight, and we go to council, and council ultimately, if they were to approve it, staff's probably next step would ask council or P&Z's approval to move forward and amend the code to where they match up. Whatever definition that is, again, from a staff perspective, we agree that the hip roof would blend in better with the surrounding neighborhoods versus the flat roof. And again, we've historically taken that measurement from the hip. So anything in town that is at a max height of 38 feet and there's a hip roof on it, it's going to be higher than 38 feet, depending on the plan. So that's kind of the staff's recommendation is that we approve the measurement to the midpoint of the roof the way we historically have done that.
And the IBC code is to the midpoint? It's not to the peak?
Correct.
So consistent with IBC would be midpoint. Historically, we've done midpoints. Okay.
Most cities in that I've been a part of, they all do the midpoint. That's a pretty standard practice. So there can be discrepancies between building codes and zoning codes. We see that all the time. So again, this is kind of in line with what staff has been doing, and so that's why we're supporting the amended PUD.
Where do these sit in the overall schematic? Are they right up front?
No,
So these are the ones
remember,
at the
we
back.
did two-story along.
That's what I was
So
clarifying.
these are further back,
So yeah, so if you take a
further
look,
south.
it'll be the larger structures that are on the back.
That's not entirely correct, though. There's a two-story in the front, immediately with the three-story behind, in the front part. And is that correct?
No, the two buildings up in front are
Two-story.
two-story.
No,
No, I don't believe so. I can pull that PUD, but it
yeah.
was,
The two buildings fronting Friendship are two-story, right?
yes.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and then the retail is down, the retail to the west is even shorter, right? One story, yes.
So it's
Yeah,
the
so-
third one.
So if you look at the elevations of the site, they're gonna range, kind of depending where you are on that property. I did highlight those. Let me pull those up from my memo. Give me 1 second.
And Jason, while you're looking, what's the elevation change between where the two-story buildings are situated and where the three-story buildings are going in?
That's
Is there
what's
a
gonna be
drop?
different. There is a drop in some areas. So from the two areas in the front, they're sitting up at around, elevation in that area is roughly 1,600 feet, 1,656 above sea level. Then it goes down to about 1,640 in the southern right corner.
Uh-huh,
So that we're looking at, almost 16-foot drop
okay.
in elevation. However, there is a portion, there's some buildings on the southwest side
Uh-huh.
of the property. Those sit at about 1656. They're about the same level
About
as
the same
the other one. So just kind of depends on where you're at in the property, but those are the rough ranges where these buildings will be sitting.
Okay, so the three stories that are directly south of the two-story buildings are gonna be, the elevation's gonna be dropping down, so the height difference isn't gonna be as,
Yeah, I think, I don't know if I can see it on this.
we don't happen to have some sort of a visual to see kind of
You-
what
you
it
s-
looks
Well,
like
look at
from
my
the,
picture I brought.
on
You
the
certainly
front.
won't be able to see it from Friendship, not driving it.
I mean, you're gonna see a stack of roofs, but I don't know how much more reveal you're really gonna see.
We tried to reach out, I have an architect.
Uh-huh.
Generally, we don't like to plug in foreign electronic devices into our system, so
Okay.
sorry. And we were out of the office all day at a field trip, so didn't get that. Yeah, I mean, really, ultimately, we're talking a difference of roughly 6 feet.
Yeah.
From the measurement to the peak, 38 to 44.
So what is the midpoint of the roof right now?
37 feet, 3 inches. So again, had he come in to pull a building permit and I was not in this chair, it would have been approved. And that's the way historically staff has operated.
But are we making them pay for another application to the zoning change?
Yes.
Even though the discrepancy is on our side for the difference?
Because ultimately, my interpretation was I go by the measurement. I mean, so I would have said to the highest point.
I just can't help believe that the gable will look better than a flat,
Oh, yeah,
For the keeping-
aesthetically, it's gonna look a lot better.
keeping with our community versus,
So what does it mean for the next guy that comes?
Well, we'll have
at
to address-
42 feet, then
We'll
it's
have to
gonna be
address that.
44.
Remember, one decision does not create
That's-
precedent for another.
And I brought my visual for everybody to remind the board that that picture that Mark Hayworth drew, that's sitting right up front of here, up front of the dais, is the one that shows these valley with very little of anything other than church steeples. One 3-story building and the whole thing is Chase Bank building. And the buck stops here and the buck starts here for us to decide how we want the skyline in this community to look for a long, long time. And 6 feet at a time is just a little creep, but it don't take long for 6 feet to turn into 18.
But I'm looking at this, if Brian were still here, and it
This would be
wasn't
approved.
Jason, we wouldn't have even seen this come back. And we would have been told it complied. Because it had complied at the midpoint. And if we've been historically measuring at the midpoint, and it complied at the midpoint, and if we hadn't changed directors, it would have never come here. I'm inclined to say, give the client the benefit of the doubt on this one, because A, our zoning things need to be cleaned up, they're conflicting. And B, we've historically been at the midpoint, so I'm basically gonna suggest that we approve it at the midpoint and let's go.
To go back to our earlier mistrust question, we don't even know if he's reading it correctly. So,
So, and before we do a motion, I do
Thank you, thank you.
need to make sure it gets in the record that we have that we have the letters, that we have
Letters of protest.
3 in protest and 1 that approved. Okay, now go ahead.
So
Just wanted to make sure that.
I have one question, Jason. So you're talking about things that need to get cleaned up. Where is this going to get cleaned up? Through city council?
This would be a zoning change, so it would have to go back through P and Z and council. So
Okay.
if you, as far as coming back later to clean that up, we
Right.
would do a notice, have public hearings, come back. So if you, whatever your motion is tonight, whether it's denial or approval, and you want to recommend to council, we recommend that we measure from this, just, I would put that in the motion if that's your concern, and then that way we can get some direction from council. Again, I interpreted it a little bit different than the way Brian did, but historically, that's the way we did it. And so that's why we're recommending approval at this time, because again, that's been the standard that's been set.
And that's consistent with International Building Code, is the midpoint.
Now, if this board says, hey, 38 feet is too high, or we want it to be 30 feet at the midpoint or anything else, because, depending on the pitch of this, it could go to 48, it could go to 52. It depends on how steep that is and what that pitch is. And so we've seen that in
And
other
we
areas.
stipulate no more than a 412 pitch then.
doesn't make any difference. The midpoint's gonna be the midpoint. I don't care what the pitch is.
Yeah, the midpoint will be the midpoint.
Yeah, steep pitch, the midpoint goes up.
If you stipulate a
That's
pitch, it may change, they may have to
No,
redesign.
No,
the
because the
building.
midpoint will change if they change the pitch, so.
It's just gonna change
Yeah.
where it's at, but it's not gonna change the height.
Yeah.
of it anymore.
Yeah.
And my thought process is they chose that pitch because it met the regs.
Anybody ready
Need a
for
motion?
You're looking for
Certainly.
any motion? What is the item number?
Z2117.
I make a motion, we approve Z2117, and that it be measured at the midpoint in this particular case, and that
we ask that the council address and staff addresses the,
Inconsistencies.
Correct.
I don't guess they have to be included in this motion, since this is one specific report, right?
No, but if you want to make that as part of the recommendation to council,
Okay.
that's appropriate.
And certainly that address, and we somehow or another, we reach a midpoint, whatever that midpoint is.
Yeah, I mean, if council ultimately decides it's 30 feet, we measure the midpoint, or it's 38 to the top, I mean, we'll do whatever.
Council, just give us some clarification so we know how to move forward.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, I have a motion by Jim and a second by Tim. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Motion carries. the next item on the agenda is public hearing 5B. Request Z 2109 to consider proposed amendments to section 8.100, temporary use types, to add a definition to events and center to allow temporary structures, tents, for event centers and establish regulations regarding the proposed use. Entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Tim, a second by Jim. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries. I believe that Jason was going to make a presentation.
Ran out to,
He left
Mr.
us.
Needham.
He has left us.
Tell me, is this yours?
Taking a short break.
Jump on in
While
there.
we wait, perhaps we could invite public comment by Mr. Cowser.
Sorry, what?
While we wait, perhaps we could welcome Mr. Cowser to provide his public comment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Mr. Cowser?
Oh, there he is. I thought he'd left. We're gonna put the cart before the horse. That's all right.
Thank y'all. Jason's familiar with a lot of this, so, and you all are familiar with a lot of it, many of you. I won't go into the background because I think you all are familiar, but if you have questions, I can talk about the why and the how. But generally, I'm speaking tonight because the draft is suggested enhancement to section 8.1 temporary use types to allow tents for event centers only, and the historic overlay of the central business district has a couple of things that I would like to call your attention to that I think would just help smooth it for everybody. And I sent an email, and I think there's a handout that kind of supports that, but I can just refer you to the code. And I had one mistake in that email. Basically, three things I'd like to call your attention to. One is M1 basically mentions impervious flooring, that the tent should be on impervious flooring. And a reminder, this area or this section of the code is for temporary use types for all businesses in multiple areas. So in terms of the request to enhance this area of the code, for event centers, that doesn't seem to make sense. I think it would make sense for restaurants if you had one of those 6-month type tents or a longer permit for construction or something to keep it from being a muddy bog. I can't imagine why that was created in the first place, to kind of go with the impervious percent covering of the lot. But in this case, for a wedding or a celebration or an anniversary party, people actually want that tent on the grass, just like was at this weekend at Marketplace. So 9 out of 10 of those tents roughly were on grass only without impervious flooring. If you put impervious flooring under a tent or had tent limited to be just on the impervious flooring, it's not what the market wants. If you do there is one type of impervious flooring you see on those temporary dance floors. If the client wants it, I say fine. If they don't, you had to put it, talk to the tent people, that's more expensive than the tent. It also increases the liability. Anything to reduce the slip and fall is good with me. So I'm suggesting for event centers, we not require impervious floorings under tents. And that's item A there in my email or the handout. And I think Shelby forwarded that email to you guys early afternoon. And my email said item B in my email was B refers to M7, but it's actually really M6. And M6 in the code, the one area I'd like to call your attention to is the time frame to set up and take down the tent. Again, I did a kind of a market assessment. We have had one event with the city's approval that had tents. Actually two, and they were back to back, but the one was a wedding, and it was a pretty nice wedding. Half the family was from here, the McRae's, half of the Silvas were from Dallas. And in that case, they wanted tents out there in the event that it rained. It did not rain during the event, but they still had them up. That particular event, a lot of weddings occur in the spring and the summer. Basically, the staffing of the tent delivery and pickup companies is such that it's a weekend-oriented business and they just can't pick them all up at the same time. In that case, they had trouble getting there within 48 hours, just as the same tent company and one other had last night. They were unable to pick up all the tents that were scattered in town for various events, including Oktoberfest. I did a survey. So I'm asking you to, on behalf of those tent vendors, add 24 more hours to that, give them 3 days. It's not in our interest. We don't want the tent there after it's over. It hurts the grass, just like impervious flooring would. We want it out of there as soon as possible. And we also, the tent people want it out of there as soon as they can get it. But it's Fredericksburg, that staffing and issues and capital issues with those big trucks. So asking you to add 1 more day to that. And then the third thing, which is not contemplated in here, but we talked about it a little bit in a couple of in the council and also in the historical review board, and that is the back-to-back use of the tent. Well, in other words, if you have 2 events and they both wanted tents, and keep in mind that most people actually do not want tents. You know, they actually like the design of this event center, and they like the 300, I mean, the statistics about Fredericksburg, Texas, 300 bluebird skies a day. I'm a pilot. I'd researched that before I moved here. You can fly without an IFR rating in Fredericksburg 300 out of 365 days. So it's a great place for anything related to pilots. Also, same risk if you're doing an event. You're not likely to have rain unless it's March or maybe May or, you know, somewhere in the spring. So from my perspective, you know, the thing that I'm asking you to do is in the, you know, infrequent occurrence of back-to-back uses that we do not take the tent down if the clients want the same tent configuration. In this case, the wedding had 3 tents. It had a big one over that back slab. If you're familiar with the property, the old Herman Sons party slab in the back of, you know, what is behind what was the plant house next to that Huckemeyer barbecue place across from City Hall. So it's 112 Crockett we're talking about behind Broadway Bank. It's a very deep lot. It goes 200 feet, roughly as far as any high school quarterback can fling a football, 2/3 of a football field. It's deep. It also transitions 7 feet from you know, the south end of the lot next to the Broadway Bank over to the front edge of the concrete next to the barbecue joint. So when you're in the back, it's low. You don't see it from the bank side, and the front is hidden by the buildings. Jerry Lukenbach came over there, and his comment was, I invited the whole council. He's the one who came and reported back to the council, and his quote is also in there. He said, you can't see the tents from the street. So my request would be, not that I want to keep tents up there. I just spent a ton of money on Azoysia Zoro grass. I want to keep it really lush. And so the request is for the back-to-back scenario to allow us to have tents back-to-back. And if you want, you know, I would submit to having the historical review officer, you know, approve that on a special case basis if anybody's concerned about just leaving tents up kind of forever. Anyway, those are my 3 requests. Any questions? And Jason, also, if you want to explain the reason for this or whatever.
Thank you very much. We started without you. That's fine.
Sorry, I had to clarify something with Ms. Braggins before she left. I just wanted to grab her, so. We took this to Historic Review Board, was our first place when we came up with this request. They had some concerns, I guess, regarding tents being kept up in perpetuity. That was one of the things, and then some of the colors. So what we tried to do was give Anna some flexibility to approve standard colors so that we're not forcing people to wait 30 days to go to the Historic Review Board. It's very similar for the umbrellas. If they're standard colors, she can approve those. They can't have any text or anything like that. The use, we defined event center. We not only defined event center, but also defined what event centers weren't. We didn't want other facilities to, like a wine tasting room, to come and say, hey, I host a bachelorette party every Friday. I'm an event center. And then they start using tents in the back of their property. And then all of a sudden this thing just kind of gets out of control. To speak to Mr. Kauser's request, I think they're reasonable, but I unfortunately don't agree with some of those, and I'll explain why. For the 48 hours, I think maybe we can adjust that timeline. Maybe it's 72. We're comfortable with that request, or keep it at 48 and allow Anna to extend that upon written request, or something like that. Development Service Director to extend it upon written request. I'm okay with that to an extent. As far as the impervious cover underneath, I'm okay if we need to tweak that, and he just wants to have his grass. I understand that aspect of it as well. Where I think staff kind of draws a line is the back-to-back events. Mr. Kaiser, I'm sure you don't plan on doing that, but this building's gonna outlive all of us, and there's gonna be a new owner in there, and they may not care about your Zoes of grass, or they may say, hey, I don't wanna rent a tent, I'm just gonna buy one and leave it up. So we kind of need that in there. Again, staff's contention is if his event center is successful and he's operating an event 2 times a week, 3 times a week, every night, and this thing is up, then at that point, maybe we need to consider a permanent structure. Because again, this was more for a special event, a wedding, that it's gonna rain, that's the thought process. So we don't agree with the back-to-back. Maybe we can put some language in there that states, again, upon written request, but no more than 7 days straight or something like that. Just some parameters, because again, the next owner may have very different designs than Mr. Kaiser and may operate his business very differently. So,
About for every day you use it, you have one day you can't use it.
there's a lot of ways we could skin that cat. I don't want to get too specific on stuff like that, just because it creates issues long term. But that's really our big concern, is the back-to-back usage. Is, again, it could be back-to-back to back-to-back to the whole summer, and it's up. And at that point, just, again, Mr. Kaiser may say, hey, this renting and taking down is just too much. If I look at the investment and I can spend X amount of dollars, he could just purchase one and put it up, and then now we have where it's not coming down. So that's our only concern long term on that one.
I like your suggestion. I think 7 days in a row max, with approval if it's back-to-back by, one person, whoever that is, and or somebody in that role. I think that makes business sense to me. I don't think it's gonna be frequent. If it does, then you're right, we need to revisit what the heck we're doing.
So why is this before us tonight?
Because this is in the zoning code, and so we're amending our zoning code. So
Okay, this is a request for, okay.
Is there anyone else here that wants to make comments on this?
Mrs. Kaiser?
No, I'm just here.
Careful. I've never known you to be quiet.
For those of you who have run through spot setback, and it's utilizing that area in a fabulous way.
Is this impacting any other event center we know of in the historic district?
this is the only event center in the historic district. So
The city does, right, in a 10 state a week.
Right, I just want to,
but they're exempt from that because of the nonprofit portion of, there's some reasons why there's that. So, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Daniel.
that's fine. This may be the only place that this is applicable now, but there could be other event
Absolutely.
centers
Yeah.
that could show up. So
Exactly.
I'm going to caution against focusing too much on the specific facts of this location and try to think about it more broadly, that it could be anywhere in the district.
And any owner, any operator, again, that's why we have the concerns about back-to-back, long-term. Again, it's been great to work with, but, the next person may not be. So, again, we can't control owners, we can only control the regs.
So Jason, in terms of what the concerns were, so do you have any language that you would substitute for item M1 to address the event center issue?
Not at this time. I'd have to sit with Daniel and kind of develop that.
So is this something that you guys would like to take back and rework and then bring back next month? Or is this something that you need us to approve subject to changes to those? What do you want to do?
I think if you're comfortable with the ordinance in general, I think you can make the recommendation of approval or denial. If you want staff to look at some of Mr. Kaiser's recommendation, you can make that recommendation that we make those changes. Ultimately, this is the draft, so we would have to go to council in that format. But we could propose some alternative language at that point. And then it takes 2 readings, so we probably wouldn't waive the first reading. We'd bring it back to finalize that language. So council could see what it is versus, I'm not a fan of writing code on the fly, just.
Right. And I'm not a fan of voting for something that's not thoroughly written out.
I guess, yeah.
So let's talk about, we need to close the public hearing first.
Sorry.
So I entertain a
Close
motion.
public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Tim and second by Jim. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All
Sorry,
opposed?
got ahead of myself.
It's all right. Let's go to action item number 6D, discussion, consideration, and recommendation regarding request Z2119. All right. So now you can have a motion or more discussion.
I just think I'd like to see some language that addresses those 3 points in here. I think you may leave the 48 hours, but then also have the ability for them to ask for an extension due to weather and have that easily approved by a city staffer if needed.
Yeah, I think under the section where we probably have Anna that can do color, I think we could also put, extension of the 48-hour removal may be approved, upon
Yeah.
written request. That's
Upon
pretty-
request.
That's pretty standard
Okay.
language.
And then on back-to-backs, that it would be approved upon request, but put some parameter around, but only for up to so many days. And then after that.
Yeah, and I
Take
would
it down.
also want to look at not so many days in a row, but even so many days in a
Days of the year.
row throughout the year. I mean,
Correct. So that's why I'm thinking it would be great if you guys would just go give it a little more consideration and then come up with new language.
Can we not make any action on it?
Can we table this one or not?
This is one of those situations where you have the ordinance requires action within 20 days of
Yeah,
today.
okay, so we're on the clock.
So you either have to, you could deny it, I guess, if you wanted us to go back and kind of come back with a new, almost be like a new application at that point. Or you could recommend that it be enacted as presented, or you could recommend that it be enacted in some modified form. And if you did that, you'd have to give the specifics of what modifications you would want to make.
Well, there's no application in this situation. This is just staff, right?
So the
Yeah.
staff initiated.
Right, it's
Um,
it's initiated
okay.
by the city.
I'm going to move we deny so that we allow staff the time to really think through those changes first before we take it up again. So motion to deny.
I second that.
I have a motion by Polly to deny. Who was that down? Who was it? Oh,
Jeff
looky
woke up.
there, Jeff. All right. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion denied.
And Jason, it is in the record that we're saying,
Just
just
redo it.
redo that language, bring it back, and then we can approve.
And make sure you include the heights. You determine it.
All right, we
As
need,
long as you can't see it from Schmidt Hill.
all right, we need to go to approval of the minutes. I did see that we do need to change the spelling for Mrs. Pedregon. It's not spelled correctly.
It's Pedragon.
R-E,
Huh?
P-E-D-R-E.
R-E, sorry. No,
Was
you,
it-
you spelled it P-E-T-R-A and it's P-E-D-R-E-G-O.
I suggest y'all start redlining it and send it back.
That's the only thing I saw.
That's what I thought. All right, anybody else have anything else?
I make a motion, we accept the minutes with the correction of Mrs. Pedregon's name.
A motion by Jim, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Polly, any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we don't have anything else on here, do we?
Just, I'll take an opportunity to invite y'all out for Monday's special workshop meetings at the University Center again. We'll probably have another lengthy discussion. It'll definitely be more focused on several issues that council had. So at that meeting, there were several issues of concern. One was the CUP, not just the process, but what are some of the parameters around it. There was some discussion, council wanted some additional information regarding caps. So we outlined types of caps, and I'll go into detail on some of the concerns we have with each type and how they work. And then we're wrapping up our data analysis, so that'll probably be the last thing we look at. We've been cleaning up the Avenue data. We've got some really good numbers based on some conversations I've had with third-party people that map this stuff. We think we're really close to what we have shown out there, and we actually think we don't have a high rate of unpermitted STRs. It is definitely less than what some of the other third-party people are showing, but our numbers are pretty much lined up. So we'll talk STR numbers by zoning district, percentages. We'll look at code enforcement, PD calls. And code enforcement's a little light. Ray's been on training Ted for 2 months, so he hasn't been in the field, hammering folks like he usually does. So those numbers will be a little different. Again, we're not going to focus too much on that. From a staff perspective, it's always been about land use and development standards, and we're going to kind of stick with those, and then kind of get some final direction, hopefully. And like I said, that's a tentative timeline in that packet. If you see it, that may change depending on how those conversations go. So again, we'll post. Yes, ma'am. So we'll
Facebook
post
Live for sure
notice.
this round?
I'm sorry?
Facebook Live for sure this round?
Yes, we streamed it last time.
Not really.
Not on Facebook. We stopped streaming on Facebook. We're streaming through our city YouTube channel.
It popped up on Facebook as available, but it was no link to it.
Oh, okay. I'll make sure IT does. I know we had the live stream, and I know you can get it through YouTube. So
Okay.
if you didn't get to see the last one, you want to watch it, that's where that
It's on YouTube,
recording is.
Fredericksburg YouTube.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Well, I don't have an extra 4 hours in my life. I need to go look at an old meeting.
It was only 3.
Yes, sir? Wait a minute. I've got one more, just a moment.
I want to clarify the procedure for the last item that we just talked about, the tents. So this is still going to go to council. So it's just like any other zoning change. If P&Z recommends denial, it still has to go to council, and then council can still approve it, or they could approve it in the modified form, or they could deny it. So knowing that, it doesn't kill it just because P&Z denied it. So knowing that information, I just want to make sure that y'all don't want to maybe, if you thought that it was going to kill it,
So, but if we approve it without without the modification specified, how do we do that?
I think the only option you would have would be to, if you don't like it as presented, then you took action that's appropriate that reflects that. If you wanted to approve it with some sort of modifications that you want to specify, that would be your other option, I guess, would be to say, we like it, but we want to change this to this, change this to this, and change this to this. So I just wanted to clarify that P&Z can't sort of kill this application.
Right.
It still has to go to council.
So, but then we're creating language on the fly, right here, aren't we?
Not necessarily.
and
Are
we
we
have to
Can we
correct
do it in generalities and give it a
Right.
direction to
Just saying we
create
want
language?
this change.
Right, you could say like amend section M1 to
Okay.
reflect the comments.
We're just
by
assuming
Mr.
that's going to
Howard.
happen before it goes to council. Is that not going to happen before it goes to council? It's going to council as presented to us now?
Well, I think there could be some probably changes in staff recommendations and maybe some modifications. But if you want to put those modifications on the record and have it go with a recommendation with certain modifications, because it's going to go to council either way, I guess is what I'm saying. So if you want, just knowing that, I don't know if you want to maybe change the action that was
The
taken.
council has to make an action on it when it goes to them?
It'll be the same thing. They'll be obligated to take some action, either deny it, approve it, or approve it and modify it.
Wouldn't that be the most logical thing?
So
for
they
them to do?
deny it twice, so what? Come back.
Right, I'm not advocating for a change, I kind of felt like it left an impression that it was going to die with your action tonight.
Yeah.
So I just wanna make sure-
No, that
Yeah,
wasn't
so the
impression. That wasn't
chances council would approve it as it was already written.
Well, and from a staff perspective is when I prepare that draft memo for council, I'll include the discussion we have, and we'll go ahead and prepare some alternative language that we have ready in case they want to
That's
see
fine.
that. But odds are, if they just say, they may say, yeah, we want to tweak it, and then that's why we have 2 readings. So
And they may
Yeah.
approve it and we never see it again.
Yeah,
that they could do that.
And
They could say as is, we're fine. And
yeah. And, yeah, I just didn't want to get us in a corner where we're having to create language.
that's
Just
fine.
just
I agree.
refresh my memory. So the only event center I keep thinking about is Hoffman House. Somehow or
And
other-
they're outside the historic district,
what it is.
remember? We excluded them for that reason.
Okay, that's what it was. I couldn't remember
Yeah.
what the two was. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I still think it's ironic that we're sitting here talking about regulating tents and we put them up every third week around here. For a week and a half, so they're up Hogan Square.
And they're red stripes.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
With,
every color in the rainbow.
spot and beer labels on it.
Are you guys ready to adjourn now?
Yeah, are you ready now?
We've had enough.
Had enough fun?
Don't forget your picture.
I'm sure Jason's had enough of all of us.
Anyone entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion, we go home, adjourn.
Motion by Jim,
I second that.
second by Jill. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right.
Thanks, guys. Shelby, we need to bring something before so we can. It's always good, I say, you have something coming, you have something coming for us next.
Brad, you can give it to her.
All right, Mr. Dooley. Yeah, that was a good meeting. See you. I was awake the whole time.
I think we also.